Hello, everyone, and we'll get started here in just a few more minutes. We always like to give folks about 3 minutes to get in, and I see folks coming in right now, which is great. So we'll be starting here shortly. Thank you. All right. Yeah, we'll keep monitoring that and we'll get started here in just a few more minutes. Thank you for joining, everyone. A few more have come on. Thank you all for joining. We'll be getting started here in just another minute or so, just letting some folks come on in. As that slows down, I will get us started. All right. Well, again, thank you for being here. It is the April edition of the Community Impact Briefing that NCST does every month. Hello, this is your presenter today and moderator. I'm Raquel Reddy, Managing Director of Community Development here at the Trust. Thank you for joining us. It is my pleasure to introduce two gentlemen that I've come to know over the years with Community Housing Partners, one of which is Janica Casper, Chief Executive Officer of Community Housing Partners. Janica has over 40 years of experience in housing and community development. And during his tenure with CHP, the organization's programs and activities have expanded across 7 states in the Southeast to include real estate development, housing services, and energy solutions. Janica has fostered the evolution of CHP's mission to include a focus on sustainable, environmentally responsible development, which has resulted in numerous recognitions for the organization and its staff. I also have the pleasure of introducing Mark Jackson, who is Vice President of CHP's Energy Solutions. Mark oversees all operations of the internationally renowned Weatherization Assistance Program, Research and Training Center, and Utility Energy Efficiency Programs. And under Mark's leadership, CHP has delivered weatherization services to more than 40,000 income qualified families and has trained over 38 participants in building science and energy conservation techniques across the United States and internationally. In addition to his work at CHP, Mark co-founded and serves as a Chief Operating Officer of Weatherizers Without Borders, an international NGO that develops weatherization programs globally. And I was so excited to introduce them that I forgot a few housekeeping rules. So just a second, Mark and Janica, I do want to mention that we will sort of hold questions to the end, but please feel free to submit your questions through the Q&A and the chat. I will be moderating that for us for today's call. And like I said, if you have any questions, just feel free to put them there or raise your hand and we will get them all answered today. So with that, let me just ask Mark you've got your presentation loaded. Hopefully everyone is seeing that now and we'll go ahead and get started here now. Mark, you now have the floor.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction. And I'm really glad to be here today. Excited to talk to you about what we do and how obviously it could help out many of the stakeholders on this call today. So Community Housing Partners, and you heard a little bit about us. And like I said, like Raquel said, I oversee three facets or three legs on our stool. And one is our federal weatherization programs. Two is our international training center based here in Virginia. We train in about 14 states on an annual basis, but we also have satellite partners and training centers in Argentina and Chile right now. And then we are also a utility program implementer for low-income programs. So let's all get started today. I'll tell you a little bit about who we are. So these are some of our senior leaders here. I just want to give you some background. We have folks that have been with us, Chris Heslop, for over 40 years working at CHP and working in weatherization. This is an older picture of our team here at the bottom. We've grown from about 40 folks a year and a half ago. We had some discussion before the call started. We're now at 90, and we're getting ready to grow to about 130. Part of that's due to weatherization federal funds, the infrastructure package, and more utility dollars that have been pouring into the state of Virginia. We also, have our director of the training center, Phil Hull here, our director of weatherization services, Megan McMillan, and Chase Counts, who's our senior director of operations. So we weatherize homes. We've weatherized a lot of homes. As we talked about earlier, as you can see in the upper right-hand corner, sometimes we come across a lot of very interesting things when we go into homes. This was actually on a DOE project officer visit. New project officers, we're trying to show them what weatherization was. We came across two desiccated cats that we pulled out during that visit. Project managers had some questions. What all do you find in these homes? You could probably take a stick and do an Indiana Jones and make a torch out of the number of cobwebs you come across on a regular basis. And again, we work on single family homes, site built, manufactured homes, mobile homes, multifamily, you name it. You can see here, we also have an emergency home and accessibility repair program, both with internal and state funds. Sometimes it's ramps that we install. That upper right-hand corner is actually our president, Jeff Reed. We were on a hot August day. We realized that there was lead on the outside of the building. So we suited up, did lead containment. And he said, it's 98 degrees and I have to put a Tyvek suit on and an N100 mask. And they sweat and sweat. And then about 4 o'clock, it poured down rain on them. So he had a great day that day. And again, we weatherize, homes again, most folks don't understand what kind of homes we weatherize. And you guys, I'm sure, have seen it over and over. These homes are homes that people don't have discretionary income to improve. We also provide training and technical assistance across the Mid-Atlantic and Southeast. And honestly, if anyone's here from Minnesota, my trainers love going to Minnesota because they say everyone in Minnesota knows how to drive when it starts snowing. Nowhere in the US do they do a better job of driving in the wintertime. We provide training internationally in the upper right-hand corner. Our lead trainer, Anthony Cox, on the left of that picture. That was the opening of our Bariloche in the Patagonia region of Argentina International Training Center a few years ago. We obviously work with renewables programs also. We do a lot of distance learning, as you can see in the bottom right-hand corner. We provided a streaming session to the state of Minnesota. But let's talk about where weatherization was and how it got here. So as you can see in this picture, Jonica loves to look at these pictures too, as you can see from his smile. On the left here, and I would tell you that's Jonica on the left, but I don't think that's him, but this is what we used to do in the early years in the 70s with the OPEC oil crisis and the energy crisis. We literally made storm windows. Now, of course, I was a young kid at that time, a budding young teenager, but we built storm windows and put them up in the fall and took them back down in the spring. On the right there is one of the first what we call manometers or pressure gauges to actually quantify how leaky a house is. But things have changed a lot in the 40-some years. So as we move forward, we look in the bottom right-hand corner, we have thermography or infrared cameras that we can literally see through walls and see the quality of installation or lack of. As you can see here, we obviously missed some insulation in this home. And then, of course, lead containment. But really, the thing to really talk about is in the very center of this picture at the top is a more comprehensive approach to weatherization. And this is important. So we think of the house as a system. Everything that happens within that house, every hole you drill, every system you have installed, everything works together. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. So a little bit about WAP. So again, WAP is the nation's largest whole house energy efficiency program. So it is the basis of almost every other energy efficiency program when it comes to low income, where there's leveraging involved. Annually, we weatherize with appropriated funds about 40,000 homes a year with an average energy cost reduction of about $264. It is a great domestic labor program. So who do we serve? Well, currently there's just under 40 million households that are eligible for weatherization across the US. And again, that's site-built, manufactured home, mobile home, multifamily. Any household at the federal level that's below 200% of poverty level is considered. There are a lot of other qualifications, which we'll go through in just a moment. So how do the federal funds roll down? So Department of Energy, and again, this is a program that started back in the 70s, those roll to 56 grantees. Now those are states, territories, Native American tribal organizations. And then from there, they roll that down to sub-grantees, typically nonprofits, community action programs, CDCs like ourselves, sometimes municipalities. And of course, then they serve the income qualified families. Now, to understand they're not, and for those who understand this already, and those who don't, it is not just federal funds that work in the weatherization program. DOE WAP is all DOE funds. Most states utilize LIHEAP funds, and those LIHEAP funds either flow through the same office at the state level. Some situations there's a separate office. Typically, most states transfer 10 to 15% of their LIHEAP funds into weatherization. So for our state, for example, 80% of the federal funds that we receive as an agency are LIHEAP funds and 20% are DOE funds. So that's huge for the program. And that only happened in the state of Virginia about 20 years ago, advocating with the state to do that. So you can see here, over the last probably 10 years, more and more money has started flowing in from utilities. And that utility money sometimes goes through the state office of weatherization. Sometimes it's a separate office, or like in Virginia, those utilities have standalone programs. They propose to the utility regulation organization. For us, it's the State Corporation Commission. They propose those programs. Once they're approved, they have a middleman company, typically an implementer. It might be Honeywell, Clear Results, or Community Housing Partners. We actually are an implementer for 3 main utilities in the state of Virginia, and then a number of co-ops. You can see a lot of money comes in from different sources that you can braid together. That's a big thing that we work on. When we go into a home, we try to make sure that not just one funding source, 2 funding sources, sometimes 4 funding sources are used on every home. There are some homes that we spend up to $35,000 on a single family home when we can braid multiple funding sources together. So who qualifies? That's a tough question. There are a lot of qualifications that are standardized from the federal level that you'll see in most state programs. So I'm just going to talk for a moment about Virginia. And it's really important that you go to the office, look online for your state weatherization office, and they will tell you everything, all the qualifying standards for weatherization. Utility qualifications can vary. So I won't go through all of this here, but you can see for Virginia, DOE weatherization and LIHEAP, because typically most states, if they're transferring LIHEAP funds over to weatherization, they'll use the exact same qualifying standards. So in our state, it is 60% of the state median income. Now, The challenge for that becomes, because we weatherize close to the Beltway near DC, the closer you get to the Beltway, incomes go up. It is harder to find single-family homes closer to those urban areas because the state median income is lower, is obviously the same, but those incomes are higher. As you get into more rural areas, it's easier to find qualified households, but obviously you don't have the density of that. I put in here just a little information about the income limits so you can kind of get a basic idea of income limits. Some other unlisted but automatic qualifiers that aren't listed on the website typically, but are in the state plan. So you can actually, again, you can go in and search for Ohio, weatherization, state plan, and find state plans, and it'll list all those. And those are the plans that are submitted to Department of Energy. But you can see there's quite a few on here. The HUD rent roll list is what we use quite a bit when it comes to multifamily. Now, utility qualifications, because remember, I said in our state, these are separate programs submitted to the State Corporation Commission. They're approved and they can have target audiences. So the couple of main differences here really is veteran. So some of the programs really target veterans, but the other one is 80% AMI. And this was a big thing that in our state, we really worked hard with the utilities and stakeholder groups, because when we get closer to those more urban areas, denser populations, SMI is just not a good qualifier. So 80% AMI is what we were able to get almost all of the utilities to agree to and the State Corporation Commission to approve. So that opens up in some areas where we cannot provide federal resources, but there are utility resources. And some of those utility programs will actually can spend up to $10,000 per home in those areas. So how does it work? So after someone has been qualified, whether it's in the federal program or in the utility program or both, we send out an energy auditor. And in the state of Virginia, our energy auditors have to go through a year worth of coursework, field work, multiple courses. And in our state, very few states in the country, they have to be licensed by a regulatory board to actually perform energy audits, because it's really important. They have to be the smartest person in weatherization. They have to understand that when they walk away, if the work scope they've generated, if we're tightening up the house and air sealing it and insulating it, that we don't have things like carbon monoxide issues that we walk away from and people can get sick or people can die. So after the audit's been completed, it usually takes about a half a day on the ground and about a day back at the office, computer modeling, making sure that we're performing all the correct energy conservation measures, health and safety, incidentals. We actually perform that measure installation. There's a national standard work specifications that DOE has set about 10 years ago for all home energy upgrades. And then the last step is a nationally credentialed quality control inspector has to inspect every single weatherization job, not necessarily utility, but federal job, before the state or the grantee will reimburse the agency. So the question comes a lot of times, what are typical weatherization measures? Well, this lists obviously a lot of things that are possible within the program. I think on a presentation a couple of years ago, someone said, you install solar water heating programs. And I said, it really depends on the program, depends on where you're at in the country. We can actually install PV systems on homes. A couple of states have been working on these programs, but it really comes down to what the ROI is, or we call it savings to investment ratio of installing those measures. But you can see there are quite a few measures that we can install, and we have in our utility programs, we typically look at more prescriptive or priority list driven measures like air sealing the home, duct sealing, insulation measures, clean and tunes of HVAC equipment, replacement of HVAC equipment. CHP, for example, in our programs last year, with our utility braided funds, we were able to replace 1,200 heat pumps. That's a lot for a weatherization agency. Your typical weatherization agency might replace 20 to 30 a year if you're lucky. But because of all the utility funds, this has been a game changer for our industry. So program performance, really important question. So when we travel internationally and we're trying to stimulate new programs in other countries, the very first question that comes up is, okay, what's the performance? What's really important to understand is it's not just about energy conservation. There are so many co-benefits that occur. So if you look at the bottom right, for every dollar invested in weatherization, that's federal weatherization, and there was a study done, performed, I think about 5 or 6 years ago, of 40,000 homes across the US, post-Recovery Act and stimulus. For every dollar invested, we receive about $1.72 in energy-related benefits. That's about $2.80 for non-energy. What they found was there were so many health and safety benefits and quality of life benefits, reduced asthma incidents, reduced lost days of work, reduced lost days of kids in school because of, again, asthma related, indoor air quality, carbon monoxide issues, you name it. And this was huge. So this, and sometimes, energy efficiency is not always the lever. Sometimes it's the other co-benefits. So you can see here, again, just as we talked about, it's about $2.78 in non-energy benefits. The great thing about these programs is these are domestically sourced labor programs. 86% of the materials that are installed are domestically sourced also. There's water cost savings. Obviously, it puts more money in families' pockets, and that's typically money that they're using locally. It lowers their out-of-pocket health costs, and you can see some of the numbers here. It's staggering when you start adding everything up together. And this is just for federal weatherization. This doesn't include any of the utility. And obviously that just compounds that. So I like to share, and I took this out because my presentation was getting pretty big, and Raquel said, Mark, why did you take out your why picture? And I said, well, it was getting long. She said, put it back in. So I've put it back in. So this is my why picture, and I asked, what's yours? So this is Maria. So this is in a town called Campana. This is about a 2-hour drive from Buenos Aires. It's probably the third pilot program of 100 homes with Weatherizers Without Borders that we worked on. And Maria loved to play soccer. And she, for whatever reason, her parents, they had to start working in other cities. And so, grandmother said, well, Maria can come stay with me for the next 6 months. So this is Maria's bedroom. And I asked people the question, what is wrong with this picture? Well, that black stuff on the walls is mold. It's not dirt. So Maria started having problems. She was an avid soccer player, loved playing soccer. About a month after she was at her grandmother's house, she just couldn't run. She couldn't run and kick the ball. She just lost interest in playing soccer because she kept getting out of breath. So went to the doctor said there's asthma. Well, in the meantime, we were energy auditing this house with folks that we were training, came across this, found high levels of mold on the walls, tested it. And we actually went in as part of this and abated that mold on the walls, recoated the walls, provided proper ventilation to the home, and improved the indoor air quality. We found out 6 months later, Maria was playing soccer again. Maria wasn't having those breathing issues. She got some treatment for that also because there was some mold in her system. So to me, that was one of the biggest success stories that we can have in weatherization. Doesn't matter if you're in Argentina, doesn't matter if in Europe, doesn't matter if you're in the US. So to me, that's my why picture. Here's my contact information. And I know Raquel is going to share this out with everyone afterwards. And obviously, if you ever have any questions, I'll never hesitate to contact myself or Jonica. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing here, Raquel and David. And then I didn't know if Jonica had anything to share also.
Yeah, I was going to open. Thank you so much, Mark. I was going to open it up to Jonica for any additional or closing comments on that, if you'd like. You're on mute. The infamous saying.
There's so many buttons these days on so many of these video conferencing.
Yeah, let me see if I can unmute. Oh, I can't do it. Okay, I thought I could have done it. If you look right.
I think it should be the button in the bottom left of the Zoom screen.
Yeah, that's where it sits for me too. Oh.
He decided the bottom right.
Oh, he's coming back in. Okay.
There we go.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, loud and clear. Thanks.
I had to get out and my whole screen disappeared. So I think that was a hint to keep it brief and open the floor for questions. But historically, we've operated the weatherization program since 1976. That picture Mark showed of the Velcro plastic storm windows. We did many of those in the early days. And today's program, though, it's just a very technical program, improves indoor air quality and makes a huge difference in people's lives. I think, Mark, your crew still carries carbon monoxide detectors. And I would say literally we've saved probably hundreds of people's lives over the 40 plus years that we've operated this program as a result of the testing that we do. And, you know, carbon monoxide is a silent killer. And Mark's got some great other stories about people getting headaches and not understanding why they always felt bad. But the key thing we wanted to get across to people, it's a pretty closed ecosystem around who's allowed to do the weatherization. Community action agencies are the prime deliverer of the program nationally. We got in the early days, our community action agency designated us as the deliverer of the program here in our area of Virginia. But if you're doing rehab programs or other programs, find out who that provider is in your area and see if you can't coordinate bringing these resources to the work that you're doing. So it could be an added resource that you can leverage those dollars and do a more complete rehab. And so I would suggest we open it up for questions. And again, Mark is our expertise, and I'm confident he'll be able to answer just about anything that you can throw at him.
Well,
Jonica is so confident in me. I appreciate that, Jonica. And if not, I've got Jonica as my backup since he's been doing it for 40 some years.
Well, thank you so much. And I agree that any question that we get today, we think we can get it answered either through Mark or Jonica. So at this time, please feel free to either drop a question in the Q&A or also feel free to drop it in the chat as well. We'll manage those questions as they come in. And for those of you who have come across some of this on your own or are looking to get into doing more with weatherization, please feel free to ask any questions that you have right now. And as we are just looking out for anything that comes over. Mark, I did want to ask you, and maybe Jonica too, I appreciate you mentioning the community action agencies as a sort of an intermediary, if you will, to work through. If someone was to work through that sort of structure, could you talk about the timing perhaps on funds and when to get into, let's say, a gut rehab project, along those lines, if you will?
Absolutely. Great question. So timing is first off, as Jonica said, find out who is your community action agency or agency that is the intermediary or the sub-grantee from the state or I'm really mostly for most folks here, probably state grants, but find out who that is. Every agency has different capacities. Some agencies, their wait list is literally 30 days from someone being verified, an approved application to and work being performed. Some it's 4 years. And that's not just capacity, but it's also funds availability for that area. However, with infrastructure money coming online, probably for most organizations by the end of the third quarter across the United States. As a reminder, weatherization gets between $200 and $250 million a year at the federal level annually appropriated. The Recovery Act was about $5 billion for 3 years back in 2009 to 2013. Infrastructure is $3.5 billion. That's about a 300% increase in funding for weatherization programs. So there's gonna be a lot of money on the table, a lot of production that needs to happen for vulnerable families. So those wait lists will probably go down dramatically because there'll be a lot more funds available. So timing will vary by agency. And the reality also is, depending on how large your organization is, you might actually have 2 agencies or 3 agencies that serve your area. So it's important to find that out because they cannot cross geographic lines. They're specific to a geographic area that the grantee assigns them or has been assigned to them. Does that answer that question?
Yes, thank you. We had a question come in. I answered it. It was just to ask if we will be providing your presentation, Mark, and we will. We typically will do that through an archive of this community impact briefing calls on our website, and we also send that out as a distribution email as well. Hang tight, I've got a question coming in. Okay, there's a question from Lori Searcy. I think that's how you say it, Lori. Is there a direct way or an internet site to identify the local community action agency in Ohio? I'm in Springfield, Clark County.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'm not sure if DOE has a site like that set up. However, the easiest way is just go in, and I use the generic term Google, but we all know what that means. Go in and do a search for Ohio Weatherization Assistance Program. That will pull up your state site. And on there typically is a tab. Virginia is great about this. It'll say providers either listed by locality or providers listed by name, and then it'll show the localities for that. I would also point out another way, if let's say the state site is not easy to navigate. If I were to search Ohio Weatherization Assistance Program state plan, that's important, state plan, it should take you, because it's a public link, take you to the state plan. And the state plan it's 50, 60 pages, but it'll list every agency and the localities that they serve. And that's a good one to look at also. But search for your state site first. Most states are fairly progressive and list all that information.
Thank you.
Mark, I was wondering if I could ask a question about manufactured housing.
Sure.
So could you talk a little bit about, what is different about weatherizing a manufactured house as opposed to, a site-built home? And I'm also curious, do you get the same kind of, results in terms of energy efficiency or weatherization efficiency, when you're working with especially older manufactured homes? Is it possible to get them up and to real efficiency?
Sure. Yeah, it's an excellent question. I would tell you that for the majority of manufactured, we also refer to them mobile homes typically, single wides, double wides. You actually see a greater energy efficiency gain typically, because when those, especially the older ones, roll off the assembly line, I literally have seen mobile homes that when I started 12 years ago here, ones that were only 10 years old, you could literally go into underneath the belly and find where there was pockets where there were no insulation. And I put my hand up and literally stick it inside the duct system because it was never sealed. So all that warm air or cool air in the summer was just blowing straight out under the belly and out into the atmosphere. So no offense to those manufactured housing production facilities, but many times they were not built as well as a site-built home because they unfortunately just don't go through the same local inspector process for rough-in inspection, things like that a lot of times. Much older homes, which are typically multi-generational, been passed down for 80 or 100 years, we still find homes with no sidewall insulation. We still come across knob and tube wiring, which I'm sure folks on this call do also. We come across little or no insulation, but typically manufactured homes, you get more energy efficiency. You also find that you improve indoor air quality a lot more because a lot of those folks use kerosene heaters, which put out a lot of carbon monoxide and a lot of moisture in the house, which creates potential for mold issues. And as Jonica alluded to, the headaches in the winter. All of our folks carry personal CO detectors or monitors. They walk into a home and it starts to go off. We shut off those combustion appliances. We ventilate the home. We get everyone out. We find out what's going on so that literally when we walk away that day, that family is not being poisoned tonight. Good question.
All right.
We actually have a mobile home set up at our training center and train on the techniques for insulating the belly boards and the ceilings and in those units. And it is possible that in some states, would you say, Mark, that some agencies may not weatherize mobile homes because they're just not technically proficient at being able to do that?
I think what typically happens is because the incidence of mobile homes are so, the percentage of that housing stock is so low in their area, their proficiency is low, so they typically won't, or they defer those homes. And that's a really important thing. So I want to talk about deferrals for a moment, if I have a moment to do that. So one of the biggest obstacles over the last 40 some years have been deferrals. And deferral means when we go to a home to perform an energy audit and we find that there's mold or asbestos or some kind of structural issue, and I don't mean gut rehab type issue, but an issue that says, you know what, we don't have our funding source, federal or utility, does not allow us. So a good example is, let's say a roof. And I don't mean a roof leak, but a pretty sizable, the roof decking is rotten and you're going to have to replace the roof decking and possibly put a new roof on. Our funding sources do not cover that. And we would defer that home, meaning that family will never receive services until they have someone come in using a different funding source or their own, which again, we understand these families typically don't have that, and replace that decking and replace that roof. At that point, we can come in and perform weatherization. We're not allowed to perform that work if, as soon as we install weatherization, that insulation is going to get wet. So we need to make sure measures are protected. What's happened in different states, our state's very different. We joined the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. A lot of dollars started pouring into essentially stop the deferrals and actually do that work to make them weatherization ready. Most states don't have access to those funds, or the funds are very small. However, with the infrastructure money, again, this is a key piece to this. With the infrastructure money, there's money being set aside to help with weatherization deferrals to get them off the list. So more information is coming out from DOE out to the grantees. So that's, again, a really important piece to understand.
So one added comment, remember that the home has to be occupied because you've got to have an eligible resident. So if you're in the business of acquiring homes and rehabbing them, you actually have to have an occupied unit. Now they can as long as they signed the application and all of that, they could be relocated and you could go in and do the work. But again, just one of those nuances that you can't bring this federal source to the table on a vacant home. It has to be occupied in order to have an eligible applicant.
Absolutely. And in rental, renters are absolutely eligible. So renters, as long as they are qualified or eligible, we have some situations where, they're privately owned by someone else and they do not have to be income eligible or eligible for the program, just the renter themselves.
Very good information. Thank you for sharing that. There are no other questions in the chat. I would just maybe ask a final question. I know that in the past, just over the years, obviously we know the benefits of doing this work. But over the years, there has been, this question of whether the appraisal or the valuation of a home is catching up with all of the techniques and materials that are being used. Do you have any thoughts on whether you've seen that gap sort of start to close when you use more energy efficiency techniques or materials?
Yeah, I think that's really still a challenging question in the US, depending on what state you're in sometimes. We probably see more of that. I think we've seen a lot of that in California and Colorado, and it comes down to things like multiple listing services, the MLS. Some MLSs are saying, hey, if it's LEED certified, or hey, if a HERS score, is this, then we can say there's more value. This is an interesting thing. So about 8 years ago, I was at a conference and the president of the Kentucky home appraisal service was there, and this question came up because an agency built 2 homes, and they built one energy efficient with a ResNet, a HERS rating score, and I don't remember what it was, but it was like 60 something. It was a great score, and then another one that was just your standard, whatever the standard building code was. The cost difference was about $7,500. I think it was $100,000 and $107,000 roughly. And the question came up, when you're an appraiser and you have comps, you have 100,000, 107, well, what do you do? And what he said is, and at least in Kentucky, and I'm sure this is in other states, appraisers are allowed to, and folks on here might know this, they're allowed to, for their state, look and actually model out what the energy savings are and how much it's going to, kind of like a utility allowance for multifamily, and actually figure out how many dollars are not going to be spending on utility over that 30-year life of the mortgage, and build that actually back into the appraisal. And in this case, they did that, and I think they came up with 105 or 106,000 against the price of 107. So you still have a gap, but it's very small, and they found additional funding to help with down payment assistance.
That's great.
So FAHI did an educational, the Federation of Appalachian Housing Enterprises is the group that initiated an educational program with the State Appraisal Association to educate them about energy efficiency and the impact, because the bottom line is that home saves energy, saves the family money, and actually that would play into the amount that they could afford to pay on their mortgage. But it was a totally fascinating study. Same builder, homes side by side, and they were actually able to convince the Appraisal Association of the value of both green building and energy efficiency.
Thanks for sharing that, Jonica. I am a big believer in more education is better than not. So thank you both so much for this information.
Sure.
I'm sure that all the attendees from today's call either learned one little thing more that they didn't know by hearing both of you present and speak on this issue. So thanks so much. With no other questions in the queue, we're going to move on to some policy updates. And Jonica and Mark, you're welcome to stay on to hear those. But if you would like to also leave, you can feel free to do that as well. So with that, let me introduce David Sanchez, who's our Director of Policy and Research. And David's going to provide some updates on both legislative and possibly regulatory updates today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for being here. I guess in terms of what's been going on, there were a couple issues I want to talk about. I want to talk about a little bit about nominations and the nomination backlog in the Senate. Talk a little bit about housing spending, both questions about infrastructure, as well as the president's recent budget and the upcoming appropriation process. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about, sort of what has been going on the regulatory front in terms of preventing foreclosures in the aftermath of COVID. So I'll walk through each of those topics, and then I'm happy to take questions at the end if you guys have any of them. I think most people are probably aware that our former president of NCST, Julia Gordon, left the organization at the end of March. A number of days later, she received one of the 3 votes that she needs to receive in the Senate to become the commissioner of the Federal Housing Administration. The Senate is on recess. It is very good that the 1 vote happened and there are still 2 more votes to go. So, the hope is that she might be in by Memorial Day or by early summer. She's definitely not the only nominee, including housing-related nominees who are currently waiting. There's a backlog of nominees at the Federal Reserve, as I think many people are aware, and then also for the director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency. So the Senate has a lot of people to vote on and not a lot of time to get it done. In terms of other things that are going on the Hill, we talked a lot on these calls about the possibility of additional housing spending through the Build Back Better or the the reconciliation-based infrastructure bill. I think the general consensus right now is that should that bill be resurrected, I think most people are betting that housing will not be a major component of the next infrastructure bill if one passes. So I think attention has really turned more to the appropriations process for the fiscal year 2023. And so the president has released his budget proposal, and the budget for HUD was proposed for at $72 billion. So that's 11.6 more than the 2022 level. So it's a pretty significant increase. The president's budget is never enacted as proposed, but it is an important marker of the administration's priorities, and it will have an impact ultimately on what is passed and signed by the president. So, just a few highlights. The proposed budget includes 200,000 new housing choice vouchers, which is a pretty big increase. There's increases in fair housing funding, in home funding, and then notably, we also just wanted to call out that the president's budget does request pretty meaningful staffing increases across HUD, which is an important way of kind of building back from the large amounts of staff that have been lost at the agency over the past few years. The next bit of HUD-related work that's going on is there's a lot of attention being paid to preventing foreclosures on FHA mortgages. So, loss mitigation, I guess, for, if you will, borrowers who are struggling to pay, mostly because of COVID-related challenges. There have been 3 significant things that have been going on in the FHA loss mitigation space. The first is that FHA has now introduced in 2 different ways. One is happening now and one will happen later down the road. The ability to give borrowers a 40-year term as part of their loan modification. So 40-year terms, while they do not, build equity as quickly, it can be a powerful tool to reduce someone's mortgage payment and thus, help them afford to stay in their home rather than face foreclosure. So, there's been a lot of discussions about that, and after a kind of a long wait, FHA finally released those proposals. There's also released a mortgagee letter about property preservation, and NCST is going to be commenting about the importance of reimbursing servicers for expenses that they incur on vacant and abandoned properties, just in terms of the blight, the importance of preventing blight from vacant and abandoned properties in neighborhoods across the country. And then finally, this is kind of a combo FHA Treasury related update. So, a number of the housing agencies have come out in different places in terms of whether a servicer is required to pause a foreclosure at the time when a homeowner assistance fund application is submitted, or at the time that a homeowner HAF application is approved by the state agency. So we continue to closely monitor that issue and encourage. We are encouraging the federal regulators to settle on when a HAP application is submitted, because I think it's been a slow process getting HAP programs off the ground in a number of states, and we don't want borrowers to be unprotected against foreclosure during those times. So I will stop there, and I'm happy to take any questions. So thank you very much.
Thanks, David. I am monitoring the Q&A in chat. I don't see anything coming in right now. Let's give it just a few more seconds here. And yeah, if there are no other questions, then we'll just give you a few more minutes back of your time today. And thank you all for joining once again. These are our monthly community impact briefing calls, so the third Wednesday of every month. Grab your lunch and join us from 12:30 to 1:30. We appreciate it, and we will be sharing the presentation that Mark Jackson provided today from CHP's Energy Solutions. So thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.